Hi, this is Christine for Trinity Stamps. Today I'm going to do a stencil tutorial using the layered birch stencils. So I like to line them all up how I'm going to use them, but I also label them. So when you get them in the package, they'll have all the trees still attached to them. I've removed all the trees and I keep them in a separate pocket. I'm sure I'll use them at some point, but I'm not going to use them today. So here I have them lined up and I label them so that when I grab them again, I can easily figure out how to use them. This is them all lined up how they should be. This is the layer you're going to use last. So I've labeled it number 3, and you're going to use the heaviest amount of color or the darkest color that you have. This is the in between, the intermediate stencil, and I've labeled it 2, and you use a medium light amount of color. And then this is the first layer you're going to use. I labeled that with 1 and an L for light amount of color, or just a light color. So I'm going to use frayed burlap for the first layer. For the middle layer, I'm going to use vintage photo. And for the last layer, the trees that are closest to us, I'm going to use ground espresso. Because when you see trees off in a distance, they're often lighter. The ones closest to you are a bit darker. So here I've sped up the video because I'm just going to do a grassy border. And I'm using the 4th stencil, which are leaves, which I won't actually use in this video at all, except for this sort of sloped part of the stencil, which I'm going to use to make the grass. And I'm using forest moss for this color. And I have to say, I haven't really ink blended on vellum too much, but it works so nicely. I was so pleased with the results, and it's very forgiving, as you'll see in a moment. So here I'm just finishing it off because I wanted a nice grassy foreground. And the dimensions of the project are quite large. They're 9 inches by 8 inches. And as you can see here, it's very forgiving because you can just use a baby wipe and wipe off any mistakes that you've made, and it doesn't affect anything. You let it dry. The one thing I do is let the vellum dry very well. I mean, you could use, on this particular vellum, it's very strong vellum, so you could use a heat gun, but I actually just prefer to leave it out for an hour and let it dry naturally. So that's what I did in between all these layers. And here I am adding frayed burlap, and these trees are the furthest away, so they should be the lightest. And I try to follow the gradient of the cut because you don't want the color getting underneath the stencil. So as I'm not using pixie spray because I felt this was not too detailed a stencil, I just have it taped on, and you want to try and get it in all the nooks and crannies, but you don't want it to shift on you. So here I'm just trying to get all the color in there, and I'm using the blending buddies from Trinity Stamps, which I love. So that's the first layer. And again, very forgiving. You can erase mistakes, which is great for someone like me who makes mistakes. So I try not to, but it's just kind of in my nature. So here I'm blending the middle layer, and again, pushing the color in there. And it's great because when it's completely dry, the color just layers on top of the underlying color. So it doesn't mix and become something muddy and dirty. It's wonderful on this, at least on this vellum. You just layer the color on top of each other, and I think it just looks fantastic. And I always love the big reveal. But you can see already kind of the other trees look a little more in the distance. So one trick to help is I always use a previous stencil that's clean and dry and put the other stencil on top of it. Especially with a large project like this, you want to make sure that everything is lined up nicely. And again, I'm taping everything down. And this, I'm going to use my darkest color, the ground espresso. So again, I'm going to get it in there. I'm going to apply a lot of color, really try and get it in all the nooks and crannies. And I was very pleased with how this project turned out. I loved the trees. And Trinity Stamps makes it really easy because they had a diagram of what, how it should look. So the lighter color in the foreground and what layer that corresponds to. But I thought it would be helpful to do a tutorial. The great thing about the stencils too, you just need to rinse them off with water. That's how easy they clean with the Distress Oxide ink. Very easy. Run it under water. Done. So that's the final background. And again, I'm cleaning off an area and I'm going to let it dry completely. And there, I don't know if you can tell from the previous picture, it's really dried completely. So now I want to make a nighttime sky, and I wasn't sure how I would approach this, so I just put chipped sapphire around the trees and made a really dark layer. And then ultimately I decided, especially since the colors don't blend with each other, once they're dried, fully dried, you can layer more ink on top of it and it won't, ruin anything. So I've also put a few star masks on there because I'm going to have a few lit up areas. So those masks are already on there. They're very small. You might not even be able to see them, but in the end project, you'll be able to tell where I had them. So I ultimately decided to go on the trees as well, since it just kind of creates a little foggy area. And then I'm going to go in with a purple color distress ink, Dusty Concord, just to create a little bit of a setting sun and the nighttime starry sky coming out, and a little fox sleeping then under that sky. And I'm just sort of blending the two. So you can ink blend the colors when they're still wet. You can do that quite well on the vellum, but once they dry, it doesn't do that, so that's great. And for my final, I'm just going to put a little bit of the sun setting.
So I added a bit of a scene onto this, and I also cut some vellum out in yellow color because I wanted to light this scene up. And what I've done is I've used a new product from Pear Blossom Press, and it allows you, instead of having to do a circuit with copper tape, it has wires connected to the battery pack with LED lights at the end. So you simply can tape the LED lights or glue them on wherever you need them. In this case, I put them over the stars and the little lantern. You simply slide in your battery and it is good to go. So it is lovely because you could make a circuit as well, but this is really, really handy. So I love how that turned out. So I thought right now I'm going to keep it as a fall scene, but I think I'm probably going to add some items to make it more Christmassy. But for right now, so I have a a little, this is actually a case from a Tim Holtz stamper, and I just knew that I was going to use this in some way. So all I did was add some wood grain paper and some other paper behind here, and this simply fits in here, and I'm gonna glue it in there so it fits in there. I'll do that off camera, but and so then the light, I'll have just the battery pack down here so that you can then press it on, you know, and it lights up. So this is what the project right now looks like. And I envisioned it for my godson. He is just turned a year old, and I just thought this would be cute. I was going to put his name on it, and hopefully it'll hang on his wall. So, well, thank you for stopping by and for watching.